Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours Saturday. If you're watching us on YouTube and want to find out more about what we do, just head on over to officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion around media production, and our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, it's a whole second hour of Q&A. So fire up Makana, get those questions into us, vote the others up and down, and chat with the other producers. If you're not in Makana, just head to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, the easiest way to get that question off the top of your mind and in front of the panel for answering, and it is available 24/7. Also available here at the QR code, and again, askofficehours.global. But speaking of questions, TJ, let's dive right in.
First up from Jeff Flukiger from Elkhorn, Wisconsin today. Jeff says, so many people seem to think that as long as they are filming or recording in public, they don't need the permission of the bystanders in the video. Shouldn't they get a signed waiver, or would the bystanders need to provide something to be removed?
Courtney?
Something to be removed. Oh, that's curious. Typically, if you're shooting a commercial or something for commercial purposes, and you're in a public place, you don't necessarily have to get permission from anyone in the background who you're not giving instructions to or you're not involving in your production in any way. If they're just bystanders and crossing through the back of the frame, no, you don't have to get a release from them if they have no expectation of privacy, if it's public property. But if you're shooting, let's say, in a mall, a lot of times we would shoot in malls, commercials, and you can't control the background all the time if you want to see the whole mall. A lot of times you'll rope off the area and have extras that are paid to walk through the background, and those have releases and are contracted and paid to do so. But typically in a situation like that, they will put a notice up at the store, if you're shooting in a store or a McDonald's or somewhere, that if you're shooting in that store or commercial, let's say they'll put a sign at the door that says, we're filming today. If you do not consent to have your image used in the background, do not enter. And so that gets them by. They take a picture of that sign at the entrance so they make sure that they're covered legally. And by entering the store, you waive your rights to any type of compensation for appearing in the background. And that gives them a little bit of a license. I suppose they could sue you. I don't know if that's ever been tested, but that's the way they handle it currently. And if they do interview you or ask you to do something on camera that is being filmed, then they probably do have to get your release, if that becomes part of a commercial. So,
commercials, and commercials and film can be a little bit different, but in general, if you're truly in public, and when I say public, you are in something owned by the state, that as public, you can, and you're obviously shooting, so it's not a concealed camera, you are assumed the rights to do that. Even if you're interviewing people, that's how you can walk up on the street and start asking people questions, and you can use that footage. Now, you probably wouldn't want to use it commercially as a commercial, but for film, documentary, even backgrounds of things, those are considered pretty much fair game. And so you can't release a whole street sometimes if you're shooting some kind of background, and that would really slow down things, like especially documentaries. Film usually does it because they want to control it. They want to control who's there. And the hardest part you have is if you do a big film with a bunch of stuff back there, you're going to get a lot of people just doing looky-loos and ruining your shot. So a lot of it has to do with just getting people out of the way and having them do what they need to do for the film. So film gets a lot of attention. But if you're out there with just a camera, we do it all the time, and it's considered that. Now, you have to remember, what is public? As Courtney underlined, the mall is not public. A theater is not public. Now, even an open mall is not public. Everything there is owned by somebody. And in that environment, you need their release, the location release, as well as releases of people there. And generally, they're going to say no unless you have a lot of money. So they're they don't really want people wandering around filming on their property. And so those are the things that now there's a lot of things that happen. People film for social media all the time, everywhere. No one really does anything about that. But if you start generating real money, and the main thing is if there's a lot of money involved, generally you want to release everybody because you don't want to test any of the things that Courtney was talking about. You don't want to test someone going, well, I didn't want to be in there, so I want to bring it up. And so it's just easier to control it by releasing everybody. But again, my strong understanding over the last 20 years has been if you're in a public place and you have an obvious camera, you do not have to release people that are in that area, but it truly has to be owned by the city, state, federal. It can't just be something that is, it can't be a private ownership in any way.
Courtney?
And private property, they can kind of stretch the law. I remember Fry's Electronics used to have this policy, store policy. You couldn't take pictures inside the store, even for your own personal use, still pictures, because of their custom design.
No, they can
interiors.
do that. They can tell you anything they want once you walk into the store.
Yeah, but let them try and confiscate the film, which they tried to do a couple of times, because I would have to, in shopping for props for commercials, you'll have to go and find those props, and this is before the internet. Find the props, photograph them for the art director, and show them to them. But if you went to Fry's, they would throw you out if you tried to photograph any of the products on the shelves.
I had one where Red was doing a release of one of their new products, and I came in with a live view about and I walked in and we're filming the whole thing. Like, we're just wandering around, looking at the Red, looking at things, looking at everybody else. And Ted Shilowitz walks up, and he ran Red at the time. And Ted walks up and he goes, "Hey, you can't use a camera here." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll turn it off." Like, I just was like, "Sure, I'll turn it off." And he goes, "And I need your film." And I was like, "There is no film." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "It's in the internet." Like, he goes, "What's the delay?" And I'm like, 20 seconds. He was not. I'm glad he still talks to me. So thanks, Ted.
I just have this scene in
Ted's,
my
by
head.
the way, is like one of the coolest guys in all of Hollywood. And he's just like, he is the most awesome dude. So anyway.
I have this scene in the back of my head of Courtney and Fry's Electronics with the security guard fighting over the film. It's like, no, you can't have that.
Yeah,
next
they
question.
confiscated the film one time. But news footage is exempt from this. News coverage, I think, they did not have to get releases from anyone, obviously, because they covered the news.
Next question.
From John Fisher in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Prices for 100-inch manual pull-down projector screens range from over $500 to under $50. What causes such a big difference in the price of screens?
Nigel?
Yeah, they go much higher than 500, I promise you. But there really are three things that you should look through in screens. First of all, depending on the quality of the screen, there may be some manual tensioning on the screen to make sure that when you pull it down, it actually stays taut, although that's probably more in an automated screen. The second thing is what the screen fabric is made out of. So there's a huge variety of screen fabrics. There are different colors, there are different viewing angles, there are different gains. So some of those screens will reflect more light than you do for them. Third thing is, are they acoustically transparent? So sometimes you can see through them, sometimes you can't. So there's I guess the fourth one is build quality. So there are a lot of very different things. So you really need to make sure you're putting the right screen in for the right use.
Next question.
From TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Looking for recommendations on a compact portable power bank that qualifies for air travel. I want enough power to recharge camera batteries and phones a couple of times, and something that itself does not take forever to charge.
Nigel?
Yeah, so I bought myself one of these things. It's a 20,000 milliamp. I think it's called Safuel. That's right, one of these devices. And I find that very good. And what's really nice about them, by the way, it's 50% off on Amazon today. What I really like about that is in the back of my Briggs & Riley case, I have this little holder, and it fits perfectly into that. And I get that's always enough charge. It holds charge really well. If you're doing large amounts of camera batteries and Macs and stuff, it will probably drain you pretty quickly. But for general quick charging, I need to fill. I'm in an airport where they don't know that people need power. I find those very, very powerful.
John?
I own several of the Anker 737 power banks. They do 240 watts. They have rapid charging. They can charge two ways, so they can get charged from the same port that you're charging other devices with. I've had a lot of success with it. It's definitely not the cheapest option out there, but it's been reliable for me.
Alex?
And as a camera person, what I tend to throw in my bag is actually the small rig VB99. So this is this is what you can see here. So the small rig, this is a V-mount battery, so I can throw it onto the back of a V-mount battery. But it also has it has basically barrels here, as well as USB-Cs, as well as a regular USB, and that will charge out. So it's a little box. It's not quite as, but you can see here, you can attach it to the back of the camera. One of the nice things about this is that, especially when I'm using this for camera rigs, I don't need to buy a bunch of different things. So I decided just to use those because I already had them. You know, if I'm already buying them, I'm just going to keep using them. So I'd rather buy a bunch of those. They are expensive. They're like $279 each. They last a long time. I mean, I power a lot of things with those at one time. There's also a rail system for it that's a V-mount that has more outputs. so you can attach that to the rail system. And now you got all these like wires coming out of it and everything else. But it's been super useful for me. And again, I think it's a little overkill for your average. Like I want to throw this into a backpack. But if you have any need for it for a camera, then having just one thing that I was just amazed that one thing could do all the things. As far as charging goes, that's really a function of the charger. I think I have them around here. I had one, but you can get these ones that are now like 240 watts. I have a 240 watt charger. It's the NGANs. So the NGAN chargers are the ones you want. And so NGAN will get you to, I have 200s and 240s. I don't really buy anything under 200 watts now when I'm taking something on the road because I want to be able to, again, have it charge. And so those will have typically 200 watt outputs from them, and then you plug them into your batteries and they will charge as fast as the battery is going to charge. Like it's not going to go any faster than 100 watts. So I would recommend looking at those. And there's a lot of people that make them. Mine are like Wotibus or something like that, but it's some Japanese brand or Chinese brand.
Courtney?
But be aware there are TSA and FAA limitations on the wattage of batteries you can carry on planes. They're limited to 100 watts per battery.
Which is why the small rig is 99.
Battery. Yeah.
That's why the big 99 on the outside.
So be careful. And you can only carry 4 of them in carry-on. And you can travel with them in luggage, but you have to have, there are special instructions that you have to follow, and you have to register them and get them approved before you fly with them. So be careful about that.
Next question.
From Ryan Rademan in Chicago, Illinois. Ryan says, which HDMI splitter model can you recommend? I needed to feed both outputs at the same time.
TJ, what do you think?
I've been using one of these, let's see if I can get this to focus here, one of these Tech-Hole HDMI splitters. It's pretty simple, 1 input and 2 outputs. If I can get it to focus, there we go. Well, never mind, failed there. But anyway, it's like $40. I've had running almost continuously for about 3 years now, I think, and it's been doing great.
John?
I use the OREI HDMI splitters on Amazon. They're very affordable. They're about $13 US, and they've been really reliable for us. I have them deployed all over, and they also, by chance, remove HDCP, so that's great.
Courtney?
Yeah, whether or not they support HDPC is kind of a gamble. You don't know what you're going to get. There's these ones, the 1x4s. I like them because you can have up to 4 outputs, the 4K and 2K, for $15.95, $16. So I don't know whether that particular one, which is I don't know the brand. It's a Chinese brand. They don't even put a brand name on them. TCNEWCL. It's a word salad HDMI splitter, but you can find them all over. If you need one that bypasses HDCP, it's going to be, you'll have to do trial and error because they try and keep that a secret. They will not publish the fact that they do that anywhere because they will lose their HDMI certification. They can't put HDMI on the product if it does that.
And I'll second John's OREI recommendation. I put one of those in so that I could have my program still go out to you guys, but also have a HDMI scope attached to it so I can look at my levels on a hardware scope. Works like a charm. Next question.
From Peter Rosado in Las Vegas, Nevada. Panel thoughts on this execution and viability of this virtual production concept.
Samuel?
Yeah, I think this is actually quite an interesting concept, at least. What it is this guy in Tennessee and this Ryan in Australia, they did this virtual production, and they have 4 cameras each, and they composed them together. So if we see here, what's green is in Australia and what's red is in Tennessee. And then they composed all this together, and they used 9 4K Ultimates and Then they used 5 Unreal engines, and they transmitted the stream over vMix. They transmitted the video feeds over vMix SRT, and they talked over Zoom, and they even had a slider shot. So it's an interesting concept. If this is really like something that we want to do, is like, it feels kind of old-fashioned now, as a lot of people here in office hours have said. And I think it's an interesting concept, but if it's viable, I don't know.
John?
I think well executed, viable, seems highly unlikely that most people are going to put the same amount of time and energy to do this for one-off events. If you had 2 remote studios and you had a lot of back and forth across the state or across the country, maybe this makes sense, but it just seems like something that's not needed any longer.
Courtney?
Yeah, this concept was invented during COVID, and it was only utilized by a lot of deep-pocketed networks like The Ellen Show or the Drew Barrymore Show, which were daily shows that had to go into production. They also used it not only during COVID, but during the strike, because if they had celebrities that were not willing to cross a picket line, even though what they were doing was not covered by the contract, they used this concept to be able to put them, make believe they were both in the studio at the same time when they really weren't. Because the cost and the amount of equipment to pull it off correctly is far too expensive if you don't really have an actual need. In other words, the program can't go on anymore unless we can solve this problem. That would be the only utilization of something like this. So I don't think there's a good reason to continue it unless you've got a burning reason that you can't fly the other person to this location, because it'd be cheaper to fly the person in and sit them down in the studio and pay for their hotel than it would be to set up these 2 remote studios in different places.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that one of the challenges that we have as as production people and as people who do events and as people do, is we do things and we persuade people to pay us to do things that we think are cool. That technically we get into this mode of, and I think that this underlines what Samuel was talking about, is like, do we actually need that? And I think everyone was talking about John and Courtney. Like, do we need to do this? And I think that we might think it's cool, but does it improve the real quality of the communication for the viewer, or does it really make it easier for someone to be comfortable as the guest? And I don't think that it does. Like, I saw when Obama did it with Oprah, that was another one of these styles of production. It just felt very stilted, and it just didn't feel very comfortable because they're not in the same room and they're not talking to each other. And you have so much gear and people trying to make this all work. And it feels, going into a green screen, as someone who's shot a lot of green screen, puts people in different space that's not necessarily conducive to being authentic. And so you just have to be very, you have to think through that process of what that looks like. And the more gear and the more you're trying to fiddle with this stuff and the more you're trying to do all these things. And I guess I would also say that, to underline what was said before me, I think that because of TikTok, because of YouTube, because of Zoom and COVID, we are used to an address that's this way. Like, we're looking at the camera. This side thing says, I am in the past. Like, if the over-the-shoulder producer shot, over the shoulder for a film, totally makes sense. Over the shoulder for the producer shot is, I am an old thinking producer, and I do it the old-fashioned way. But nobody's doing that in social media. So the entire future is all about direct address, in my opinion. And it just feels much more comfortable every time I see something looking off, especially something that's new. I'm like, what are you guys thinking? Like that's not. And I started doing in Teratron. I had a client, and I was like, really? You want to look through the teleprompter? Like why would we? It was like, that's how I reacted to it when I first saw it. And I was like, this is going to be really hard, and there's going to be this thing. And within 2 or 3 shows, I was like, I'm never doing anything else. So I've been doing this for 15 years, but I will say that nowadays, with everybody using Zoom and the way that TikTok works and the way that YouTube works, where everyone's direct address, I just think that direct address is the future, and I don't think that's going to change.
TJ?
Alex mentioned that over-the-shoulder shot, and I'm just wondering what other people think. I always think of that when I see that. To me, that just says I'm trying to prove that I am actually here in the same space with the person with whom, I am speaking. And it really, that's the only reason for that kind of shot, is just is proof that I was here talking to that person in person, as opposed to, I was here and then,
it creates a
some
geometry.
other time.
I mean, I will say that it creates geometry. So when you see someone's shoulder, it creates a depth that you don't have when you don't have that shoulder in there. So the shoulder, in the way that your mind looks at the space gets bigger when you put a shoulder in it. And that's how we look at it, is that when you put someone that's out of focus that's in the foreground, it creates more geometry, that makes it feel like bigger and deeper than it does when you don't have that. So I mean, to some degree, you're right that it proves it, but it also, there is a feeling that you get that's different when you have somebody, like we do things where we're doing moves behind people's heads that are out of focus, that are with the foreground there, and it creates this depth that you wouldn't get with just the raw camera.
Nigel?
Yeah, we are a community who brings an unnecessary amount of technology to solve problems, and it feels like this is a proof of concept that does exactly that. I have to tell you, most of the media that I'm consuming nowadays doesn't look anything like that. When I see two people talking, they're actually looking at each other in a wide shot, and then they are, face-on shots. So it feels old world, but it might just be somebody throwing a lot of technology to solve a problem for the heck of it.
The other thing is, if the video is not purely look at me, this is a proof of concept, look at how well we pulled this off. If you're trying to sell it as if it were real life, and people don't notice that it's a virtual production until it breaks, the second it breaks and that illusion is gone, it distracts from what you're trying to produce. It distracts from the story. So unless you're going to be perfect at it, it's not even worth going down that road.
And even if you're perfect at it, one of the things that I really look at, the amount of effort that's required. When I talk to clients, and this is it's like a sickness that happens in production. If somebody gets caught up in something that's cool, and it's a sickness that I've caught in the past. I've gotten like the cold. I've gotten it, like it got in me, and then I had it for a couple days, or I had it for a couple months. It was like a cough. That you get into this thing like, I want to do something because it's technically interesting to me. And this is, and again, what we have to keep on coming back to is, how do people feel? Do they feel like, are you able to get the experience out of that person that's in front of the camera? And how much energy is you as a production company spending on that one feature as opposed to making, all the other things that could make people feel comfortable, make people feel connected, because what we're really about is connecting people, and that's what confuses people so much about TikTok, is they're like, how do people get such big followings? Because they feel connected, and they don't need to have all that gear, to do that. And so I think that you just have to keep thinking about, how do we connect people? How do you make it feel? How do you communicate those things? If you need that, we were talking, I don't know if there's a question about this on this one, but there was we're going to talk about it next week, is there's a video where there's tons of graphics and all this stuff happening, but everything serves the story. And I think that's you just want to keep on, does this actually serve the story, and are you doing it efficiently, to make that happen?
Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Orlando, Florida says, is there a way for Unity comms to use Apple CarPlay for audio? So far, no luck.
Courtney?
Well, I'm not sure if this is the case or not, because I don't use CarPlay, but there are restrictions on apps that work in the car if the car is in motion, that are locked out, that you can't operate. You can't play YouTube, for example, in your car if it's in motion. When you're stopped and in park, you can. But so that may be a restriction, or it may be the fact that the app itself has to be designed to work and be friendly, since it has to interrupt, its audio has to interrupt. Let's say if you're listening to the radio or listening to something else and you want your comms to interrupt that, it has to be designed to do that over the car's speaker system. And so I'm not sure if they ever designed Unity to do that in a car situation where there are certain uses of audio and video that are forbidden while the car is moving.
Alex?
Yeah, you may want to also look at test whether the CarPlay will work, but also test whether a Bluetooth connection to your car will work. I think that you have a higher probability of success with the Bluetooth connection because the phone is just kind of going, this is a Bluetooth connection to this car. This is like, I'm going to treat it like headphones. So you may want to try not plugging it into your car and just using Bluetooth, and it may actually work. But let us know. I'm really interested now. So,
next question.
Ken Jordan from Surrey, Great Britain. I recently came across the Audient ORIA Dolby Atmos interface. Do you consider the ORIA a cost-effective solution for mastering immersive audio, especially for those transitioning to working with Dolby Atmos formats?
Alex?
Yeah, it looks really impressive. It's a very, very good-looking thing. It is a it's very in the world of surround monitoring. It is cost effective. It's like $2,600. A lot of these start at $6,000 to $8,000 and then start going up from there. I did talk a little bit to Mickey about it on the way through, and Mickey's comments were, while limited in I/O and functionality, this looks like good, affordable entryway into monitoring Atmos. I would not consider Audient as a manufacturer of mastering grade converters, but this is mostly sufficient for most tasks and a great option for learning. He said that for products that he looks at are like Burl, Digital Audio Denmark, Prism, and Lynx are what he would consider mastering grade. So those are those, and then you have converters like RME, Universal Audio, Apogee. So those are things to think about. I believe that you would need. This is just manipulating the app. I think I was talking to Mickey about it. Mickey told me this. I don't know anything about this converter. It requires the Dolby renderer, and it may or may not. We think that it requires the Dolby renderer, the standalone, so you may not be able to use it directly with Logic, to have that work. So those are things to think about there. It looks like it's got a lot of pretty controls. so anyway, and it looks like it's got some good stuff if you're doing just Dolby. And I think it looks like a pretty cost effective way to get started.
Next question.
From Khaled Al Jamaya in Hassa, Saudi Arabia. Khaled says, "Good morning, office hours. Key and fill. Could someone explain what I need and how to use it for a super clean all-color telestration? The edge color bleed that is visible when using the chroma key for telestration drives me crazy. Thanks in advance."
Well, the master of telestration is among us. Alex, what do you say?
So this is I'm using many colors. Now, I don't know, Khalid, if you are using, I don't know if, see now, of course, I broke it. It's not working at all now. Hold on, let me see if this was so, I just reached over quietly and just started drawing, and it's not working. So this demo may be pretty ugly here. Let me see why that is the case.
Probably Luma keys over chroma keys, though.
Yeah, so you definitely want to do a Luma key over a chroma key on this, and one reason that you may be getting blur. Oh, I turned this on. I was doing a presentation yesterday and I was hitting buttons. So I have this all working in different colors, but this is all using a Luma key. This is not using a chroma key. The problem you're going to have with chroma key is that you're at 422, so that means that your chroma, the green, is half the resolution of the total picture. And so that's the 2-2 part is the green is the color. So the 4 is the luminance. And so the problem is you have you're going to get little edges there, and you're always going to get little edges there on the key. So you don't want to use chroma keying for this type of operation. It does give you some more, but you're always going to have some little jagged areas that you deal with. But you can do it here. So let me show you what I have set up. So I'm not doing a key fill. I'm just doing a key. I'm going to go to my disk 2. Let's see here. Pull this up. And so this will be very meta, I think. Because I'm going to be drawing over top of the thing that's doing the drawing thing. Let's see here. So if you have it here, here are the settings that I have here. So this is the settings that you want here. So right now I'm clipping at about 38 and doing it 50. Now what I do is, when I do this, when I'm actually doing it, I'll go like, I'll draw something like this, and then sometimes I might put another color in so that I can see other colors, and just so that I can see what those look like. Now, what I'm going to do is, now that I have those up, I'm going to start playing with this, and I'm going to ruin it. But what I'll start to do here is I'll start moving this back and forth. You see how they start to disappear and fade in? So you can do 38 and 50 and it'll work, but you can start to play with where is the, and see how the background changes. You want to go just to where the background, where these are as bright as they can go. Like see how they stop moving. That's why I'm about 50, right? And then the clip, you'll see how these clip out. But right when I get to where they are, I don't want to go too far. See how it'll knock my. So I want to make it, and by doing that, by setting it just where it needs to be, what you end up with is the softest edges that you can have. So you set those, and it's a really delicate thing to kind of play with it there. But 38 and 50 will work there as you saw there. But if you want to play with it a little bit, that's I believe, but right now it's working at 20, on the 29 or something to 50. It's not about the numbers. It's about making sure the background isn't flickering when you change it, when you turn it on and off, and making sure that you're seeing as much of those images as you can. But that's a Luma key, and it will always look better than a chroma key in this environment for this, unless you're doing a true key fill, and that's a whole nother thing. So that's the thing to think about there.
TJ?
Yeah, Alex, are you using white or black as your main color that you're drawing on top of?
Black. Wait, hold on. Let me make sure. Yeah, black. Because I used to use white, and the reason I used white was because I like to have a whiteboard. But white is, I'm trying to move away from white on all my production stuff, like all my presentations and so on and so forth. So yeah, so when I cut to black, this is what it actually looks like, right? So this is the, so now I have a blackboard essentially that I'm drawing on. So if I want to draw something for someone, that's how that looks there. But I would. Anyway, so that's the thing to think about if you're doing the color over black. And again, I got lots of different colors. I will admit that I was just mostly doing white and then keying the color in, but then I only had one color. And then people like Courtney made me look silly because he was doing lots of colors. And then I felt like I needed to. And we're like, okay, I got to figure this out. And so then I figured it out. And Juan is the one that writes this, and he's done a great job at making it great. So anyway, there you go.
Next question.
Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. Thoughts on the new RED V-Raptor X camera with global shutter and how this will empower filmmakers with smaller budgets, all new 8K sensor, and many other enhancements.
Samuel?
Yeah, I think this is actually quite interesting. It is a $30,000 camera, so it's definitely not inexpensive. But it looks like that they have overcome the challenges that Sony and several other manufacturers have had with dynamic range on global shutters. I watched a couple of videos on it, and it says that it has. They say it has 17 stops of dynamic range, and it also has a mode to get extra dynamic range, but it will use more data, and you can turn it on and off in post. So it's like a raw camera, and it seems interesting, but of course it has the Canon RF mount, and it seems like it has autofocus too. So it's an interesting concept. It's 8K can do 8K 120.
John?
Yeah, it really feels like no compromise solution. It's interesting. It's coming out right at the same time as the Piranha from Sony, and offering a lot of the same feature sets around the same budget price. So definitely seems like they're trying to be very competitive against that lower end cinema market.
Alex?
Yeah, there's still a lot of room down in the sub $10,000 range that are going there. We have Sony releasing its own global shutter under $10,000 as well. So I think it's the A9. I think has the global shutter built into it, and I think that we're going to see more and more global shutters. I think global shutter is going to be the next thing. Like it really. I think the rolling shutter will probably go away over time, just because of the jiggliness and as people start doing more and more global shutters. Typically, global shutter, you pay a price in dynamic range. So the fact that the Raptor is theoretically at 17 stops, it's pretty great. But it's still expensive camera. I mean, it's not the camera that you're going to typically buy and own. These are the kind of cameras that you'll rent most of the time. And so, buying and own is a camera under 10 grand. And the cameras we rent are the ones that are over. Like for me, that's the pivot point. Like, oh, we should just rent these when we need them. And so I think that's $10,000 or $12,000 is like my upper limit of what I'm willing to like put money into. So I think that's going to be when you see $25,000 or $30,000. I'm like, well, we'll go to a rental house. Some companies will definitely get them, and they are impressive, but remember that the RED also has smaller format cameras like the Komodo that are global shutter as well.
Samuel?
Yeah, and one thing that I just wanted to mention I thought was interesting is that if you have this camera from before, then you can send it in to upgrade, and they can upgrade the sensor for you. So if you have the Raptor before, then they'll upgrade it for $12,000. So that's interesting.
Just a quick reminder, the show is driven by your questions. And we've got a whole second hour full of room for your questions today. So go ahead and get those questions into us via Makana. Also, while you're in Makana, don't forget to vote the other questions up and down, live chat with the other producers, and you can go to askofficehours.global. If you're not in Makana, anybody can do it. Askofficehours.global 24/7. Just head there, get those questions in. Name, question, go. You're good to go. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, have you ever had to interface a fire safety system to a PA to automatically mute the PA when the alarm is activated? How is that done?
John?
I've typically seen it with a cold relay that communicates to the GPIO port on the actual mixer. I've also seen this done where they integrate into the actual power for the PA. So like the relay system that turns the system on and off, and then they'll turn off the system if there's a fire response. Sometimes they'll also integrate sending audio to a channel, and so they can broadcast the fire alarm over the PA. So it just depends on what the local laws are and how the venue wants to handle that.
Courtney?
Yeah, John covered most of it there. Yeah, I was going to suggest putting a microphone on the alarm itself and running it into a separate channel with a solo button that could be activated when the alarm goes off. So it solos that microphone and shuts off the others. However, you might want to keep one microphone active during an alarm situation so you could give instructions to the crowd if it's a fire, please exit through the back exits. You might have to give critical safety instructions. So you don't want to kill the PA necessarily in a venue if there's a fire alarm. You just want to be able to, you still may want to use the PA to issue instructions to the crowd on how to get out of the building.
Next question.
From Juan C. Robles in Mexico City, Mexico. Juan says, sorry, yet another AI tool. This one can create a video presentation from a picture, including voice.
John?
Watching the demo is very uncomfortable. They're doing like the punch in a mouth, like over a picture, and then throwing some expressions on that with AI. It's just, it doesn't look great. It wasn't engaging. It's early, right? So this is all get better, but right now it's very uncanny valley.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that, again, I've said this before, but the one of the ways we learned how to kill ants is to if you see ants coming into your house, feed them sugar, and then slowly cut that sugar with something like NutraSweet or something that doesn't have that's very much like sugar. Splenda is what I use, and you slowly cut it with Splenda, and what happens is the ants can't tell the difference between the sugar and the Splenda, and they will if you give it, if that's all you put up there. But if you put the sugar in and you slowly turn it, they'll just keep eating that they'll keep eating it. It'll kill the entire ant hive or whatever you call it. It'll like wipe it out because they'll starve to death without knowing it. And the reason I bring that up is it takes weeks, by the way. It's not something you do in one day. But the reason I bring that up is that I think as we move more and more towards AI and digital, there's a lot of I love it. I use it all the time. I think it's great. Be very careful of interacting with other people with it. I think that when we have, and the reason I bring up that is our frontal lobe will say, hey, that's a person. Our lower brain will be like, that's not a person. Like I can tell the difference. And the difference between your frontal lobe saying something is a thing, like social media is fulfilling my social needs, or this is filling those things. When there's a huge gap between your frontal lobe saying that this should work, this should be this is the same as this, and your lower brain going, this is not fulfilling what I need. The delta between those two is depression. And so the thing is that you and because you're not feeding what you actually need, but you think you are. And I think that these grasps at handing things that aren't authentic, and this gets into a little bit of what we were talking about before in the multi-camera shoot. What we work on here is we work on making sure that we sound great and we look good, and it's a comfortable view, but it's still us. And it's not a digital background, and it's not it's still us. And the more organic we can be, the more connected and more authentic we can be. And I think we have to be very careful about replacing people with things that are, because what will happen is people will just kind of push those away. They'll be less effective. I don't think, as soon as you feel like it's a machine, I think your willingness to continue to interact with it will drop pretty dramatically.
Courtney?
This is one of the fears of the Screen Actors Guild, is the synthespian, as they call them, a synthetic actor. And this company is selling them for spokesmodels, that are delivering a presentation or something. I would not use them, as Alex said, for any kind of interactivity, because that's generally a giveaway. Although Google has tried with their AI phone servant, and it didn't duplex, they call it. It didn't pan out. I don't think they ever released it publicly very far. If they did, they withdrew it by now. It's fairly believable voice-wise and inflection-wise, but if you're trying to interact with it and ask it questions, there's a bit of a time delay for the AI to take over. And if you're trying to do it with video, there's going to be even a longer delay for it to take over and deliver a response to your question. And that will be the tip-off in your mind that you're speaking to a synthetic individual and not the real thing.
Next question.
From Paul Walhus in Starling Plaza, Texas. Paul says, Bill Gates is most excited about 3 humanoid robot companies. Which ones do you like? Agility, Apollo maker Apptronik, and UCLA's RoMeLa. Apptronik is an Austin-based startup that spun out of the human-centered robotics lab at UT. No Tesla.
Alex?
Boston Dynamics. Like Boston Dynamics is doing what is the furthest along in those areas. I think that the idea of trying to build a truly humanoid thing it gets back to exactly what we just talked about before. Super weird. It probably will not happen effectively in our lifetime. Like, stop making them try to be exactly like humans. Like, it's just I get you can get funding for that. I just don't think you're going to actually get people to want to use them. And so I think that but Boston Dynamics is building a variety of things that are actually useful and get into those. But the amount of processing it takes for a computer to do, I think we vastly underestimate the power of the human mind. Like, I think, and I think that people think, oh, it's a bunch of processors and we can do this stuff. And now they're finding that, well, maybe not. There's some quantum calculations in popular mechanics this month or this week or whatever. They're saying, well, this might be a lot more complicated than we think. And so I think that they're going to have a real challenge here. And I think it's kind of a dead end. But I do think that Boston Dynamics is building things that potentially could be useful, because they're taking advantage of what's needed there. Like the dog, turns out it's really good to have it go through workspaces with a LiDAR and pick things up. And so there's useful cases for it. There's obviously military applications for those things. But I think that those make sense. Trying to make it look just like a human, I don't think that's really going to be useful.
Courtney?
I haven't had a chance to look at these 3 different robots that they mentioned here, but there's 2 different applications of humanoid robotics. One is to be able to do factory jobs that are dangerous or repetitive. And there, it doesn't matter what your robot. Boston Dynamics that's the goal of Boston Dynamics, is to replace, to be able to have a mobile work platform that can pick up things, move things the way a human could. The other classification of humanoid robots is for companionship, accompaniment, assisted living, assisting the elderly, to become not only an assistant to do chores around the house that will help an individual, but can also provide some degree of companionship. And this is what, like a dog, only it's kind of hard, and you can interact with some of these robots. Japan has been working on this for years and years. Osmo was an offshoot of that development. I don't know if any of the Japanese humanoid robots competed in this competition, but it'd be interesting to see if that's what they're going for, or if these ones that you mentioned here are strictly industrial application robots that just have the mobility of a human to do industrial repetitive jobs.
Alex?
I read this article just as an aside. When you you see same day in Amazon, to deliver to you. I mean, it means you're probably 20 minutes from an Amazon warehouse, 20, 30 minutes from an Amazon warehouse. But more importantly, the amount of time it takes to get from the time you order to the time it's ready to put into a truck, 11 minutes. 11 minutes. It's crazy. That's all I gotta say. It's not humanoid, by the way. It's just machines.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, U.S. OSHA standards require employers to provide potable water in the workplace. Do you ever use water filtration devices on the set or show site, or do you usually just set a cooler down with canned drinks?
John?
Lots and lots of bottles of water. I would not have any sort of filtration drink system put in place that you're drinking non-potable water and trying to make your crew filter it themselves. That is not the way to go.
TJ?
Yes, what John said. And also, you can do like a large bottled water, get like a 5-gallon jug that will run through a cooler type of thing if you want to do that too.
Courtney?
Well, this has changed over the years on sets because there was a period of time where it was go green, okay, we're going to eliminate plastic waste on the set. No more water bottles. We'll put the plastic jug and we'll have cups available on the set. And then they went to, okay, cups is causing waste, so you have to bring your own bottle, your own personal bottle, and you can fill it up from our tank of potable water on set. But you have to bring your own water, your own cup, because we will not provide you with cups or bottles. So that was the green. Then COVID hit. And so then we can't have any contamination. Everybody can't be touching that spigot on the water jug. So then we went back to bottled water and the green went out because of the restrictions on the set of non-contact contamination for the virus. So I don't know where it stands now, whether we've gone back to bring your own bottle. Maybe they went to bring your own bottled water. We won't provide any, although union rules do require that they provide potable water. So I'm not sure where it stands now as far as the container that water is provided in.
Alex?
Yeah, metal has also become a thing. So, metal, we see a lot of this at events where they're providing the crew and actually the attendees with recyclable metal containers. And so we saw that start about 5 years ago, and it's picked up speed because it's theoretically better. Like, you never know whether any of these are actually better, but theoretically better, to do that. I will admit that I strongly prefer my own bottle, and I'm trying to think, I can't, for some reason, the name jumped out of I use a HydroSpark. Here's the funny thing about it is I don't actually use the Bluetooth part of it anymore. So I'm looking for a better one, but I bought some of these as I was testing them. And I have the 32 and I think the 24 or 20 or whatever. And I have a tendency to show up at a long event with both of those. The 32 kind of sits on my desk, and the 24 I kind of wander around it if I need to. Here's what I like about it, and I don't need to have need to have it measure how much water I'm drinking. I thought I would, but I don't. I like the straw. So there's a straw that goes all the way to the bottom, so you don't have to lift it up. You just kind of pull it in and do it. The only problem with it is if you do it on a Zoom, it always looks like you're vaping. So that's the only thing that I feel like I look like I'm vaping, but it's just a much more convenient way to drink it at an event than swinging it up and so on and so forth. And so a water bottle with a straw is my strong preference, and it has nothing to do with environmental stuff and more to do with just convenience, and just managing my space. I tend to like to have things that don't have me have a lot of external requirements.
Next question.
From Paul Walhus in Starling Plaza, Texas. Do you want to turn your Raspberry Pi into a beelink? Would this really cool glitzy case with LEDs do the job?
Samuel?
No, well, there's hundreds, probably thousands of different Raspberry Pi cases. Here's one that looks kind of like a computer tower. So if you like it, you can go with it. I don't really see any benefits with it, really.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I kind of hate these RGB LEDs that now are appearing on everything from keyboards to mini computers. I got one of those T9 mini computers. I gave it to a friend because it drove me nuts, because all the time it was awake, it had these racing colors around the edge of it, which was, and sitting across the room, your eye is constantly drawn to it for no reason. If it's on and I just want it running as an appliance in the background, I don't want it going. And even when it was asleep, it would fade in and out one color and then fade in and out another color and then fade in and out another color. So gamers like flashy objects. I don't.
Next question.
Tommy Chance in St. Paul, Minnesota asks, what's the best bang for the buck monitor for editing photos and videos these days? Are there any that stand out over the others?
TJ?
I've been a fan of Dell monitors for many years. I'm sitting in front of several of them right now. Quality is outstanding. I've never seen a dead pixel on any of them. And they are relatively easy to calibrate. Calibration when you're editing a video or photos is a key thing.
And what you want to look for, Tommy, in terms of monitor specs, you want to look at how much of the P3 color space are they able to reproduce. So if you're trying to edit photos and edit videos, you want to be looking at something that's going to give you 93, 95%. Another line to look at in terms of bang for the buck that I've had a lot of success with is the LG Ultrafine. They've got I think they're really nice ones that are acceptable are around $1,000, but for $400 you can get a 32-inch monitor that's IPS that doesn't have too terrible of color shift to it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, would there be any reverb plugin that can simulate different materials in a space, brick versus stone, etc.?
Alex?
There are different plugins that reproduce different spaces. I don't think that we've had them. I've seen them defined as the type of materials. Nikki says a convolution reverb with an appropriate IR loaded, or an algorithmic reverb dialed in appropriately. So you make it sound like that. But I don't know if there's. I haven't seen anywhere I could define brick or stone. But maybe.
Next question.
From Tim Peters in Tehachapi. Yesterday you had the discussion on genlock. What brand and model number do you use for analog DA for distribution?
Alex?
It's what we use typically as a throwdown. We don't have the larger distribution boxes, but we typically use an AJA. It is a C10 DA, and that'll allow us to distribute TriSync.
Courtney?
I don't know about analog, but I've used the Blackmagic DA. That's a 1 in, 6 out, I think, that works as a little part of their little black boxes, SDI, 1080p.
And that works that's worked for you for distributing TriSync?
I don't know about TriSync, but I don't
think it will because I think it's digital.
SDI video, but not tri-level sync, which we can use as a reference as well.
Yeah, so I think that for TriSync, we need an analog distribution box, which is why we use the AJA one.
Right.
Next question.
Peter Jonasson from Sweden. Is the lower cost stream series the future we have to accept, or will the upscaled Epic style series return?
Alex?
The lower cost streamed series, I don't know the budgets on some of these things are getting pretty big. I mean, I don't think that the budgets on many of these things are escalating past feature film. So I'm not sure if and I think, I think the big problem that you have is feature film going to remain even a thing? This is a really bad year for theaters, in case you're wondering. And we're not clear that everyone's going to make it to the other end of the 2024. And if a large distribution failed, it would kill the ability to generate the revenue. So if an AMC or a Cinemark or someone else didn't make it through 2024, and they suddenly had to turn their theaters into something else, it's the end of theatrical, as we know it. Because there's not even if you have a handful of screens that are really doing well, there's the high watermarks are like the IMAXs and the Dolbys. There's just not enough seats. So there's not you have to have AMC. I think I think Cinemark, I believe, has about 1.5 or 2 million seats. AMC is like 3.2 million seats. So those are big numbers that you have to fill, and they're required to generate the kind of revenue that you can do for a large format film. And we've moved, all theatrical has moved to these kind of giant films, not because all of the, almost, not all, but almost all of the smaller films have gone to streaming. And so there's this market where you have to do these big ones, and they need all those seats. They need 12,000 screens. They need 6,000 screens. They need 5,000 screens. They can't have it if there's only 2,000 screens that they can distribute to. They can't make the money that they need to pay off the film. And so that math is going to get pretty complicated as we go through this year. We'll see what happens. But it's a pretty hard year.
TJ?
I think the worry was with the recent strikes in Hollywood that, we would end up more in a, sort of a reality TV world again, if it were. And, the big, the Game of Thrones thing where, they're spending, millions of dollars to produce an epic series would just sort of fall by the wayside. And now with, Warner Brothers announcing cuts, and so, there's a lot of belt tightening, as it were, in the streaming world, and the people are realizing that, streaming money doesn't make as much money as we thought it might, and so, or streaming video doesn't make as much money as we thought it might. So then, they're cutting back on a lot of the shows. So it's up to us as consumers to sort of vote with our dollars, and either watch the shows we want to watch and not watch the ones we don't if we're worried about, not liking these low quality reality style TV shows.
Nigel?
When vaudeville was a big thing in the US, every small town had multiple vaudeville type performance venues. And, now the only place you can find multiple venues like that is somewhere else, like Broadway. And most towns and cities are down to one or two small, by small I mean 1,200 seat type theatre, where some sort of performing arts goes on live. And I think we can expect the same thing for movies, that over time they will exist, but they will exist in smaller footprints and deliver a better quality. As to the sort of types of different stuff I know I'm watching on the streaming services, I think the tentpole things still exist. I mean, we just finished watching The Crown. That's taken, 10 years. That's 60 episodes. I don't know how much they spent on each episode, but I'm guessing it's $5 or $10 million. That's a $500 million investment. And I think those tentpole things will still exist. But I think round them, we will see much smaller things that are easier to produce. And I started watching the Zorro series on Netflix last night, which looks like a sort of Spanish-American co-production. Very interesting. And its sort of epic scenes are sort of, I think, probably a lot of AI and a lot of animation. So I think we'll see some of that as well.
Courtney?
Yeah, I think when they transitioned, when the providers like Netflix went from just a distribution product to a production product, producing their own original content, they had to do that to attract new subscriptions. And to attract more subscriptions every year, that at one point they finally reached an equilibrium where they're not getting more and more subscriptions, plus they're facing churn because there's so many streaming services available out there now. People are signing up for one new series and then they're canceling and going to another one for that new premiere series, epic series, which is the thing that is supposed to attract new users to the platform, so that they based a lot of those models on continuous revenue from those people that signed up for a subscription. So now what they're trying to do is as they're reaching that equilibrium, is they're opening new tiers which incorporate advertising, so they can make those advertising bucks in addition to the streaming charge. It'll be a lower cost subscription, but then they're going to get money from the advertisers, so they can at least maintain their model and continue to produce content. But a lot of that, they may only produce 2 or 3 or 4 instead of 150 new dramatic series every year. They may only produce 4 or 5 really expensive ones, and the rest of them will be chaff, the reality shows, the game shows, the thing that used to fill up junk television, daytime television.
All right, so that's going to take us to the top of the first hour. I want to thank everybody for hanging in there and asking all your questions. We got a lot of fun coming up this week. Glenn Phillips from Toad the Wet Sprockets in on Monday. Captain Disillusion Graphics Breakdown on Tuesday. I'm doing coloring on Thursday, and then we'll be back for weekend Q&A after that. Very exciting. Also, don't forget, we've got the Office Hours Volunteers meeting right after this. And welcome back to the second hour. We're going to dive into the next group of questions. Why don't you go ahead, TJ?
Mickey Makachar from Manila in the Philippines says, SD Super Nexus will come with integration with Digico boards. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Alex.
We're starting to see the integration. So Audiotonics owns Digico. They also own SSL. They own Sound Devices. They own Allen & Heath. And what's interesting about what Audiotonics does, I think that's really fascinating, is that they mostly leave these companies alone. So they just let them, like, they don't actually want a lot of cross-pollination. But one of the advantages that they have is that when they want to connect these, they don't have to sit there and negotiate they don't have to, if they want to connect to a Yamaha board, there's all these meetings and there's things and there's what's your technology and what's my technology. Inside of the Audiotonics world, they can say, well, I just want this to tie to this. And I think that the Nexus solutions being tied directly to Digico boards is pretty exciting, especially when it comes to wireless for music and other things like that. It could be really, it's a really great integration there. So pretty exciting in my opinion. And I think that this is usually when a company buys smaller companies, you feel like, oh, well, that's the end of that. That's the end of them being good. And I feel like Audiotonics has really gotten the right mix, the right balance, where they take advantage of the capabilities of the whole group, but they also really encourage those groups to keep on working on the verticals that they already have. CalRec is also part of that group as well. So I think you'll start to see more and more of these integrations with what Sound Devices is doing as they move forward.
It's really a blessing when there are M&A activity going on, and it's a slow burn in terms of how those companies integrate. And it's not so much, hey, we're going to make radical changes at the front end, but maybe we're going to gain some efficiencies from an administration point of view. And really the magic is when it's really the foundational technologies change hands, not so much the flashy stuff. Next question.
From Tommy Chance in St. Paul, Minnesota. Are there any Skylum Luminar Neo users on the panel? It looks great for AI photo retouching.
Alex?
This looks amazing. Like, I haven't seen it before this question. I mean, I've known about Skylum before and Luminar, but I haven't seen this Neo, and it's impressive as far as what it's actually doing to do those things. Photoshop will do some of this for you. I would love to take something head to head and do it in Photoshop and do it here and see, how well each one of them does the work. But this gets back into what we were talking about last week with Michael Cioni of what is utility AI. AI is not creating the story, but just allowing us to touch things up and move things around. It's very impressive.
Courtney?
Yeah, these I don't know, I haven't seen this particular product, but this type of capability is being built into a whole lot of stuff these days. Most flagship phones can now do this on the phone itself. The new Apple iPhone 15 can, and the new S24 can. It has an NPU built into it, so it can handle a lot of these AI tricks of removal of unwanted objects, moving objects in the frame, in a still frame, moving from one place to another place. It can all do that. In fact, Microsoft is incorporating Copilot into everything, and even Microsoft Paint, which is the rudimentary free paint program that hasn't changed in 50 years in Windows, is now going to incorporate a lot of these AI extension and removal and fill-ins capabilities using AI in the next release. So it's coming as a utility in practically any image editing or image generation program. I think you'll find something like this in almost all of them in a year or so.
And just a clarification, this is a completely different company from Topaz Labs, correct?
Yeah, completely different.
So when you Google Skylum or Luminar Neo and Topaz Labs comes up as a sponsored first result that says Luminar Neo, buy once, own forever, that is not what you want. That is a different company.
Topaz is great, but not.
Topaz is great, yeah, but it's a different company.
Well done on the ad buy.
Next question.
Paul Walhus in Starling Plaza, Texas asks, what do you think about the concept of a viewing party, as well as a pregame and postgame show, to use a sports analogy?
Nigel?
When I commuted for a living, I would often have dinner with my wife. She was somewhere else in a different city, and I would be in a restaurant, and we'd have our cell phones, and we'd talk over dinner. If there's one thing I hate more than anything else, it's people talking in movie theaters or talking while I'm trying to watch a program. By the way, death penalty for people who talk in movie theaters while the movie's on. So the original idea of a sort of viewing party or share plate was really interesting to me. Reality is we've never, ever used it. Now, if what we're talking about is people twitching or playing games or watching sports, that might be a place where it's particularly interesting because people don't tend to listen to the commentary very much. They tend to watch the action, or they tend to be involved in a conversation around the action. And so I think there'll probably be a bifurcation here. I think there probably is a role for some of it where the spoken word is not very important and the action is the more important. But where the spoken word is important, I mean, being connected to someone and being silent for an hour and a half when I watch the movie seems a bit stupid.
Alex?
It's interesting. We have this with the keynotes that Apple does and some other folks do, where they do a keynote and we all watch it and then we all talk about it in Zoom. I actually find that to be my favorite way to watch these. I get kind of bored otherwise. With most of these systems, I get bored watching it. Now, I will say that we see some things in the sports analogy. We are seeing some kind of ride-alongs, not for all of us, but what's interesting is that so Ben Roethlisberger is doing his own live stream that goes along with the Steeler games. And so he does this thing where he does a live stream, and there's like thousands of people now showing up to watch him live. And it's a little hard to get the linkage together where you're listening to him. Obviously the Manning brothers will do it with the game, and because they're part of ESPN, you get to listen to them talk. I find that model to be pretty interesting, of having a person who knows what they're talking about actually talking about the game. It's kind of like more Tony Romo, like people who are actually there talking about the thing. And what I like about the Manning brothers when they do it right is that they don't get into all the other stupid stuff that happens on TV. And they're really just two really smart quarterbacks that are sitting there talking inside baseball. Like when they really just sit there and watch, you're just listening to them talk. Oh, see what he's doing there. He's doing this, and ESPN is slowly turning the graphics up. Now Peyton Manning can walk over and grab onto, like show a play in 3D, and they're sneaking up on us on a really, really great, in my opinion, a much better way to watch it. I think there is a real value to, I don't think you need to open the mics for everyone, but I think there's a real value to viewing parties where everyone's watching the same thing at the same time. There was a thing called Netflix Party that we tried, and it was funny. We did it once, and we were like, oh, this is really fun. And then I did it again, and I invited Justine Ezerick, and she just invited a bunch of people, and the whole thing just went, like the whole thing just fell off the thing because there's too many people in the system. So I think that the problem that we get into is really how you manage that queuing. But I think there is something powerful about people being able to tweet amongst themselves, have experts answering questions, have all those things happening, and watching it all at the same time, having the playhead stay connected to it. And I think that is a valuable thing. It's also by the way, very valuable for sponsors because it means no one's jumping the commercials because they're all trying to stay in sync. So I think that's a really interesting puzzle as far as that goes. But I think but having that everyone watching together, and being able to ask questions with something like Mukana or something else like that is really useful in that process. And so anyway, I think it's a good model. I do agree with Nigel. Like when I watch a movie for the first time, I don't want to hear anybody. But if I have, and we used to have long dry spells in between hangouts or whatever. We were doing these events, and we got into the habit of watching movies. So we watched The Princess Bride, and we watched other things together over hangouts at the time. And we'd all sit there and just talk about it. Like, oh, I really love this scene and I love what he does there. Now, I've seen Princess Bride 50 times. Like, there's nothing you're interrupting at that point. So, and then you're talking to a bunch of people that have already seen it a bunch of times, all talking about what we like and things that we noticed and that kind of thing. I find that to be a lot of fun. So it just depends on, I think it depends on what you're watching and whether you've seen it before or not.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think as far as dramatic, if non-sports entertainment, or even keynote keynote presentations for a new product, let's say, I want to hear the audio of the person who's presenting that information or the actors who are presenting the storyline. I don't want to hear somebody kibitzing while I'm trying to follow the storyline or follow the explanation of what the new product does. I don't like to hear somebody saying, "Oh, making a joke about, such and such had that last year, et cetera." I'd rather see the whole presentation and then comment on it afterwards, like maybe Paul was suggesting. A post game might be better to sit back and then analyze what we just saw. And maybe if we have the ability to replay, that would be great. And then go back and disassemble and discuss what we just saw. But during the show, I'm against, as many have said here, against any kind of side commentary that would distract you from the information being provided.
Alex?
One thing that we did a lot of testing on is having basketball games, for instance, and having a basketball pro and a social media person talking during the game, and you can actually listen to it while you're in the arena watching the game. And what was interesting about it was that what was really great about that is the commentary was actually better than most of the game commentary, and you're hearing someone that is, if you're in that space, you're hearing someone who used to play for that team talking about it and really just kind of and I felt like that was much deeper. So I think that the advantage of some of this is that, like, for instance, there's only so many experts that are actually interesting to listen to watching. Again, if we use football as an analogy, because that's what we talked about here, there's like 3 good people that are doing commentary. There's Collinsworth and Tony Romo and Troy Aikman. And after that, it drops off like a cliff, as far as who's worth listening to. And so being able to listen to someone else and tie that back in, I think is a really good business model. I think we'll see more of it.
And on a smaller scale for the viewing parties, it's not as It Just Works set up as it should be, but Apple's SharePlay is actually really nice. My brother lives about an hour away. My sister lives 5 hours away. And when we want to stay in touch, sometimes it's like, well, let's all hop on a FaceTime and watch something on SharePlay. And it's a great way to stay connected without having to make the journey. But on the note of the Manning brothers, that has to be the way more fun of a set to work on than the actual Monday Night Football set. They just must be having a blast.
Yeah, 100%.
Next question.
Chester Sweeney from Las Vegas, Nevada, and via the QR code says, "Hey, Alex, during This Week in Tech, I was wondering if you mentioned the QR code for office hours to Cory Doctorow and Leo's Twit fans."
Alex?
We did. And I think Leo's thinking about it. So I don't know if Corey's thinking about it, but I think Leo's definitely thinking about it.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, "Heritage Audio has introduced audio interfaces with Neve-style preamps. Where could you see them competing with the UAD Apollo range for analog emulation?"
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think that these are all, again, desktop interfaces. It'd be really interesting to see what the quality of the preamps are. They're pretty expensive. So I think that the problem for me, I mean, you might like the form factor, but as I started looking at those form factors, they're now as soon as something gets up into the cost of a mix pre, I kind of go, well, like that. I really like my mix pre, so I had to look at them a little bit deeper. But they do have one thing I will say is they have balanced outputs, which is pretty interesting as far as that's I think it's probably one of the biggest things that I miss on a mix pre, on the smaller mix pre's, is balanced outputs.
Next question.
From Ryan Gordon in New York City, also via the QR code. Ryan says, "Hi, Office Hours crews. Has anyone managed to get the YouTube app, not YouTube TV, on the latest generation Apple TV 4K to output 5.1 surround? Thanks."
TJ?
Yes, I have listened to various shows or watched them on YouTube and have heard surround sound. And there's one I recall in particular where I heard somebody saying, "Left channel, center channel, right surround, left surround, LFE," over and over and over, and it was moving around.
Alex?
That might have sounded a lot like me. And we've done live streams of it as well. So you can live stream out now in 4K HDR 5.1, and we've done some of that for some of the locations, and you're going to see us do more testing of that in the not too distant future. So it's Yeah, it's definitely working. It only works on the over the OTT boxes, so you can't watch it actually in your. You can't watch it on the web version or on other devices. You have to really. I mean, but the OTT devices is where it's working well.
Next question.
From John Jordan in Edison, New Jersey. For our company's town hall presentations, we produce a broadcast and stream it to Zoom webinar. Want to further engage remote participants? Is switching back to a regular Zoom meeting recommended so we can incorporate remote participant webcams?
Alex?
It depends on how many you have and what kind of thing. So I'm not a big fan of letting average people turn on their webcams and their mics because usually they're really grating to me. Like it's the person's fine, but the quality of their microphone and the quality of their video give me a headache. And so I tend to shy away from that. But I will say on the other side of that, my wife runs events for a meditation center here in Northern California. And that's all they do. They have 100 people there, 50 people there, 200 people there, and they all can open up their mics and talk and everything else. And it's very successful for them. Again, I would prefer to have people watching and asking questions over text like Makana than I would having them open up their actual mics. The other thing that I have is just mic control. Like once you turn something on, you don't know what they're going to say and how long they're going to say it. And and I have sat through thousands of sessions. And so I will admit that I'm very hardened to this, is that I feel that there's that one moment that we all think about, that really tear-jerking moment. For me, it's sometimes eye-jerking, but tear-jerking moment that is this, you're like, well, you'll lose all of those opportunities in the back and forth with the person with the mic and everything else. For every one of those, there's 99 times when someone stands up and pontificates about something that no one cares about and then asks a question that no one wants to hear because they had something they wanted to say and they thought that it was much smarter than it actually was. And that's really what mostly happens when you open up a mic, and so, and so we just have to know that we might get one every once in a while. We go, oh, that was really great. They're not all great. They're not, and most of them are real drags to the energy of the show. That's why, by the way, we do 45 minutes of presentation and 10 minutes of questions, is because of the open mics. When you can manage questions effectively, it very quickly becomes 15 minutes of presentation and 45 minutes of Q&A, because now you can listen to the audience and react to them but still have some kind of control over the quality.
Next question.
From Robert Linkrum in Belmont Shores, California. Any interesting products from NAMM 2024 in Anaheim?
Alex, what did you see?
I haven't seen anything. I'm not going. I apologize. We weren't able to get a ground crew. I lost my camera crew, and then I have this pinch next week I think if we had a big ground crew, I probably would have tried to pull the all-nighters that were required to be able to go down over this weekend, and I chose not to. So I am not going. So I haven't seen anything. I'm not going to see anything. Again, we put out a volunteer push, and we weren't able to get a ground crew set up early, before the show. And so my brother was able to do it, and then he got called into a show. So anyway, and right now in the business, you eat whatever shows up. So anyway, I don't know what's happening there. Hopefully, we'll be able to do kind of a follow up over next week and talk and get some folks that were down there. I know that Nick Batt is down there, and some other folks have been looking at it. So hopefully we'll be able to look at it a little closer.
Next question.
From Samuel Nordvik in Norway. Alex, did you find a reliable solution for extending an Insta360 link away from a computer?
Alex?
I have not found one more than 10 feet. It's really I haven't been able to get it to work. So that has been the challenge that I've had is that 10 feet is about I've got 15-foot ones, and it's just not reliable. So 10 feet has been as far as I can go with those cameras.
Samuel?
Yeah, I was just watching Aaron Precky's studio tour, and he was showing these fiber USB cables. They have one that's 15 meters or 50 feet, I think.
And was he running the cameras with that?
No, he was running the Elgato teleprompter, the new one with USB-C. So he ran the data, but he had to use the HDMI, or he had to use a powered USB hub. So I was just thinking perhaps that would be something that would work.
Oh, you mean Yeah, I mean that possibly if you use the USB hub at the far end where the camera is. Because the real problem is the cameras will show up, it just won't power up. It's the power that's the problem with the camera, not the distribution of the video. It's the power where it'll turn green for a second. You'll see it a moment of image and then it goes away. And that's but I didn't think of putting a hub at the camera. Might work.
I've actually done this a long time ago with like USB 2 camera, so it's like it's a lot lower data rate. But I was able to do like 30 meters with like three USB extensions, and it's not 100% reliable, but as long as you have a powered hub, then it worked quite well. Right. But 10 meters works very well.
Interesting.
My experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Courtney?
Yeah, you guys beat me to it. That's what I was going to suggest, a powered hub at the far end. Because that Instalink Insta360 link has servos and controls that pull a lot more current than your typical chip camera. It's going to pull a lot more current, and the further away you get from that 5-volt DC source, the lower the voltage is going to drop, which is probably why when those LEDs come on to tell you that it's waking up, it drops the voltage below the point and it shuts down. So if you have a powered hub at the far end, you could probably run a USB extension cable, a C or an A, out to your hub, and that extension cable can have a little repeater in it, so it'll repeat the data as it comes back out the far end, so you can get longer than about 30 feet or 10 meters. And then a power at the other end of the hub to give enough power to the Link 360 to power up its electronics and servos, and it can still get the data back.
Now, when you put those repeaters into the chain, is there any appreciable latency?
No, I think it just resquares the waves. It's just a reclocker, that amplifies and resquares. Schmidt trigger. It just resquares the waves so that they don't start to turn into sine waves. Get back to square.
All right, next question.
From Tim McMillan in Poughkeepsie, New York, via the QR code. Tim says, I remember Alex Lindsay talking about wishing they had digital blue-collar workers. What skills would be the ideal digital blue-collar worker have?
Alex Lindsay?
I'm not wishing. I'm saying that we are blue-collar workers. Like that is we are, this is a skill set. This is a, so it's, I tend to think of it as a craftsperson's kind of thing. And so, we are not, I think that the reason that I bring this up, and I've talked about this for probably the last 2 decades, is that we have this whole thing like, we have, you go to, there's a school here, for instance, for kids that are having, they're getting back into the groove of things. They're having a little trouble at school. And they go, okay, well, we're going to have you learn automotive. We're going to have you learn these other, these more VOTEC types of things. And we really should be focusing on making graphics and video production and everything else, one of those things. But we keep thinking about it as, you have to go to art school, or you have to go to college, or you have to go to all these other things. These are skill sets that I teach kids that are 12 years old to do at a professional level, or on summer camps. It doesn't require, it's a skill set. It takes practice. It takes work. It's still very technical, but it does not mean that it does not mean that it, and it can make a lot of money, and it can make real money that is part of the future. And I think that we have to keep thinking about how do we do this. We've done it in Rwanda. We built a school there. We've had over 500 graduates, and they're all working. Like we're 92% of them, I think. 92% of them are working in the industry. So they are. It's been very, very effective, and it's just part. It's actually our program is actually part of the skills, the skills programs within Rwanda. So it's underneath that umbrella, not under the university area. And so I think that we need to keep thinking about this because there are so many things that we could be doing. Our industries are oftentimes constrained by lack of labor, like lack of skilled labor that can actually execute that thing. We think that there's, that it's something else, but I believe, as someone who was in the front row for the dot bombs when they happened in 2000, that what really happened there is that we ran out of people who knew what they were doing by about 1997, 1998. And then after that, they were just, you could go for a 6-week course and get paid $75,000 a year. that's a massive inflation. And what I mean by inflation is that you have the skill to payment, the skill to dollars is in hyperinflation because there's very low skill. They came out with no life experience. They just know how to punch little buttons, and they don't understand that stuff. But they're getting paid a lot, and it just burned into all of these startups' overhead because they're just hiring people that don't know what they're doing. They're chasing their tail and doing it because there isn't anybody left. And I think that's why you see Apple doing their coding, all their coding stuff. That's why you have Grow with Google. They are, Grow with Google is saying you don't need to have a college degree. We would love to have you just start learning, because we can't get enough people to fill the ranks, and I think as we look at, there are so many things we can do with education, with corporate communication, with all kinds of things that we don't do because it's too expensive or not even possible because there's not enough people in the pipeline. And so I think that, figuring out ways, that's what I've been committed to for a long time. This is office hours is an informal way to help people move forward and make this their business. But I've done more formal ways in the past, and I still have some of those. And I think that it's really, really important that we provide people digital opportunities.
Courtney?
Well, let's see. A digital blue-collar worker. You need how about a packet loss repairman, to go in. Oh, here's your problem, lady. You got, it's all clogged up here at your router. But no, seriously, signal processing experts in this day of digital signals going around and packetized data. It does take a specialized worker to troubleshoot problems and to speed things up and handle, all the problems you can run into in distributing packetized, Ethernet or network signals. So a blue-collar packet loss repair,
Alex?
But to define it pretty specifically on mine, I'm really talking about artists. Like artists can be someone that we can train to get those things. Every time I see a handwritten note taped to the front of a store, I think, oh, we're not done yet. Because they wouldn't do that if they had somebody that could do it for them, because it looks horrible. Anyway, there you go.
Next question.
Matthew LeConte from Oakland says, on a MacBook Pro M1, every time I open the YouTube, the microphone indicator turns on. All browser and system settings deny permissions. Thoughts?
Alex?
I wonder if you're using Chrome. Chrome may be asking for permission as a general thing because you're in there. If you're, let us know if you ask that again, whether you're using Safari or Chrome. But I think Chrome may want the mic off more often than it needs it.
Courtney? Can't hear you, Courtney.
Sorry, I didn't. The microphone wasn't on when it should have been. Same problem. Make sure that voice search isn't turned on, and it may be switching if you're going to YouTube in the browser. If you have a YouTube app on your MacBook Pro, it may be switching to the YouTube app if you go to that program, and that maybe have the permission turned on for voice search, which may be why the microphone's opening.
Next question.
From Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Orlando, Florida, with an amazing live follow-up. After changing rental cars, Unity works on Apple CarPlay. Go figure.
Nigel.
I think there are two variables when you rent cars around CarPlay, other than whether it has it or not. The first is the manufacturer of cars. I find there's an inconsistent execution. Often you get a rental car that hasn't been updated and the code's old. They've never actually synced the right level of version. In fact, mostly it just repeatedly tells you there's an upgrade, which you can't do anything about. And the second thing is wired versus wireless. I find the wireless very inconsistent use. The sound quality is much poorer. And if you can, use the wired connection. I wonder whether, however, it would work better in this case with the wireless, but it changes by car.
Courtney?
Another thing you got to remember in pairing, because and if you're pairing via Bluetooth connection to your CarPlay, is that everybody else pairs their phone to it, and so there can be, if they don't go out and clear all the pairings, forget all the pairings every time that car is returned, it can have too many pairings in there, and yours may not be being found because it's overflowed the number of pairs that are in that Bluetooth memory. So you got to clear the memory every time it comes back, and a lot of car rental companies don't do that. So you'll get in a car and you'll see all, do you want to pair with all this list of things you've never heard of before? And it's all previous renters of that car.
It is amazing how much the implementation of CarPlay varies from manufacturer to manufacturer. I have CarPlay in my car. It's nice. It's fine. Then I was in somebody else's car, and they had a really nice car. And the density of the screen and how sharp and smooth everything was, I was just like, wow. And then you see some of the stuff that they're trying to do with the full integration. It's one of those things that I know, not to take this into a whole unforced error on GM's part conversation, but I will not buy a car that doesn't have it. Just hands down. Next question.
From Danny Grizzle in Longview, Texas. Danny says, circling back to live stream format and audience interaction, what are the pros and cons of allowing telephone call-ins, like a radio talk show? I would have calls answered by screeners before they were forwarded to the live stream.
Alex?
The advantage is that it's a lower impact on the caller. So they just all they have to do is jump in and ask a question. So that helps. It also has this quote unquote kind of real feeling that you get to hear their voice and you can have more of a conversation. So you can go, especially if you're fixing a problem for them, going back and forth, like car talk is a good example of that. Although car talk is not, you have to remember, car talk is not them like having a random caller call. It feels like that if you ever watched it, but it's not that way. People sent those problems in months ago. They're hashed out with the team. That person is prepped and then brought in. Like there's a whole bunch of things that sound like it's just they got on the phone call, but they're not. So you have to remember that a lot of those bigger ones do that. The smaller ones, again, it's low impact. A lot of this had to do with the fact of not being able to really manage it. Like how do you get people to SMS? How do you get people to email? And a lot of folks are using those now. The cons of it are pretty much everything else. People are crazy, and allowing them to just talk on the phone on a broadcast is nuts, and so like it is like, I'm just sorry, but as someone who's been, I did radio 30 years ago. I've been for 30 years, I've dealt with people with open mics, in events, in all those things. And it's just the possibilities of what they can do is endless, when you open up that mic. And so even if you screen them, they're going to screen. We've had people screen fine into call-in shows and then just do things that are wackadoodle. That's a technical term for it, wackadoodle. And it's just, it is it really doesn't improve the quality of your show. And when you can start, the advantage that we have in this show is, we have a lot of questions. People are voting on them. We're doing them in the order that the listeners want to hear them in. But even when we do shows, like I did a show on Tuesday, and we had about 5,000 people watching, I think, roughly 5,000. And we got 1,100 questions. And what happens is when you talk to someone who's never done it before, they go, well, I don't, I don't know if we're going to get good questions. I'm like, you're going to get good questions. And every single question, not almost every single, but like 90% of those questions were great. Like they weren't just good questions. Because they were people there. They were passionate about the product. They were interested in that thing. And it was just a really, and anyway, so you let the audience make those questions, but then you can sit there and sift through them all. And you go, oh, this is a good question. This is a good question. This is a good question. And you can answer those questions instead of letting them take over your show, which is what happens when you open the mics. It's just not worth it.
And the other thing that happens for the people that do this really well are if they are doing a true live call-in, they're paying a person to sit there and watch the numbers that are coming in. And they know how many times you've called before. And they know if you're a risk. And they know kind of what you're going to say. Like I listen to the sports station in Philadelphia, WIP, and they do it every day. But if you listen every day, it's the same 10 people that call in. So whether you're paying to have someone do a bunch of pre-production or you're paying to have someone manage it live, you're probably cheaper to go ahead with with Alex's suggestion. Courtney, go ahead.
Baba booey. Yeah, it just goes to show you that even though the calls are carefully screened, you can get some bozo in there like me that can disrupt things. So yeah, I agree with Alex. Yeah, it's and CJ as well, because if you go with dependable things, you're going to get the same people over and over again because they like to become part of the show themselves. and you're not going to get any new ideas or new look at things. So even screening is problematic. And that's why, like Alex mentioned, a lot of the call-in shows, you have to write in via email or some other fashion to mention that you want to be on the show. Then there's a pre-show interview with you to let you know. They have your name, your driver's license number, and the address where the lawyers will send the lawsuits to before they allow you to go on the show. And then they will call you back and put you on the air only after you've been carefully vetted. They know exactly who you are and exactly what you're going to talk about.
Alex?
Yeah, and for shock jocks, there's an advantage of it. I mean, if you want to make fun of someone or argue with them, there is some value to that. I mean, we used to, in my morning show, we used to let people call in, but they were in trouble when they got there. Like as soon as, because we were there to cause trouble, and so they were part of the show, but not in a way that they probably enjoyed. And so I think that is there are reasons for you to do that. But I will say that what we have found over and over and over again is that people putting the text in, because I have a question system, so I use this in a lot of places, as I said before, you get to see what the behaviors are. And people love putting those questions in, and they love that, and they're listening for them. You're not getting any degraded interaction because people are calling in. The show just feels a lot tighter because you're just going boom, 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 and it's just a denser show, in my opinion, a much better show than the stuff that we did before that.
All right, well, that's going to do it for another Saturday. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Just a reminder, at the top of the hour, we're going to have the Office Hours Volunteers meeting. So we had the new volunteers meeting last week. So if you were at that one, that was the how to get started. This is going to be the nuts and bolts of what we're actually doing. Also worth noting is tomorrow's show, if you're new around here, tomorrow's show is Introspection, and it is not broadcast on, it's a Zoom link, it is on YouTube now, but just to go to officehours.global/Sunday to find that one. Thanks to the panel for being here and helping us answer all these questions. It's great to see everyone's smiling faces on a Saturday morning. And thank you to the back-end crew for getting everybody in here, making us look good, sound good, cutting the show. We couldn't do it without the small village that wakes up every morning. And thank you to our audience, our producers, for asking the questions. You guys and girls out there, ladies and gentlemen, pardon me, are the ones who are fueling us and driving us and getting us in every day. So we really appreciate it. On the Tlaloc Traversal today, 76,000 miles, that's 122,000 kilometers, which is 75.8 million bananas for scale. All right, we'll see you in after hours.
Don't call in.
Don't call in.
Don't call in.
Don't call us.
Don't write.
Alex, do you like my hoodie I made?
Never.
Yes, that's great. Never, ever, ever, ever. Never.
The legend.
I did not see that.
Does
before.
it continue on the back, John?
Your name goes over all of the text and in my views. So I didn't read it. Never, ever, ever. But you got to get that. Never, ever, ever. Then you add a couple more. Never, 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 ever.
You have to print on the back.
End on a never, though.
Oh, you did.
And then see back at the bottom of it.
Yeah. Never, ever, ever.
I'll admit it. I caught myself saying it in a meeting this week, and I was like, oh, boy.
Yeah, see, it's a sickness. All right. See everybody.
Cheers.